Russia is burning like hell. Putin's energy arteries from Moscow to the Urals and Siberia are being cut off, exploding and burning one by one. These images were taken on the night of November 18th from a massive natural gas pipeline in the Omsk region. It looks like a nuclear explosion. Now look closely at these images. Two tankers loaded with flammable material have overturned onto the tracks and turned into balls of fire. The voice of the Russian citizen recording the incident trembles with panic and shock.
Вот эти первые две бочки, они сразу вылетели, понял?
Это в кювете?
Да, они сразу вылетели, а те остатки фи.
On the evening of November 19th, the critical railway line between the Kardon and Shamar stations in Perm was targeted. The fire was so large that even emergency crews struggled for hours to bring the flames under control. Local news sources reported within the first few minutes that this could be an act of sabotage. The identity of the perpetrator remains unclear. The Kremlin is remaining silent, ignoring the incident. The Ukrainian side has also not made any statement so far. Who is behind this sabotage is not the Kremlin's main concern. The problem is, why couldn't they prevent it? More than 80% of Russia's logistics supply is transported by rail. Perm is a vital transit point for fuel and military supplies to the Western fronts. The paralysis of this line is not just a delay, but a direct, calculated blow to all their logistical plans. So what is the FSB, tasked with protecting the country's most critical infrastructure, doing? They are busy hunting down pro-Western dissidents and ordinary citizens who use a single anti-war word on social media. For the sake of propaganda, they are neglecting real security. This is where Putin is in trouble. While building a massive apparatus of repression against his own people, the country's most critical infrastructure is left defenseless against a threat that infiltrates from within, which we call the Ghost Army. This Ghost Army could be sabotage groups supported by Ukraine or Russian citizens who are fed up with Putin's war and have infiltrated from within. The result is the same. The FSB cannot ensure the country's internal security. The sabotage in Perm is the final blow to Russia's already dying energy distribution system. Ukraine has been targeting Russia's oil refineries for months. 21 of the 38 major refineries have been targeted, significantly reducing oil processing capacity. According to Ukrainian intelligence, more than 38% of Moscow's refining capacity has been destroyed. This was a blow from the air. Now, the sabotage in Perm is a blow from the ground. But these strikes actually began in November. On November 1st, the main intelligence directorate of Ukraine, HUR, delivered an even more deadly blow. 3 main lines of the 400-kilometre Koltsovoy Ring military fuel pipeline, considered the heart of the Russian army, were blown up in the Ramenskoe region, right on Moscow's doorstep. This pipeline supplied jet fuel, diesel and gasoline not only to the civilian market, but also directly to the Zhukovsky Flight Test Center, the Chkalovsky Special Transport Base, the Kubinka Fighter Squadron, and Moscow's Air Defense Shield. The simultaneous destruction of the 3 lines of this artery, with an annual capacity of 3 million tons of jet fuel, shattered Moscow's impregnable fortress myth overnight. A ground sabotage team plunged the dagger into the heart of the capital, 30 to 40 kilometers away. Neither the railway in Perm nor this strategic pipeline around Moscow is safe anymore. The Russian army has no choice but to rely on roads and railways to deliver fuel to the front lines. But both routes are now open targets for Ukrainian drones, partisans, and the Ghost Army. While a pipeline silently and cheaply transports millions of liters of fuel per day, transporting the same amount by truck is both 10 to 15 times more expensive and takes weeks. A single accident sabotage, like the one in Perm, prevents fuel from reaching the entire Western Front for days. The loss of the Moscow Ring pipeline directly impacts the Air Force. Su-57 tests have slowed down, elite pilot training flights have decreased, and patrol aircraft over the capital have had to conserve fuel. The civilian population felt this collapse immediately. With 38% of refineries already gone, the distribution channels also cut off. Gas stations truly ran dry. The 20-litre limit in Crimea, the Luhansk black market, Rosneft's 200-litre truck limit. Behind all of these lies the same reality. Fuel is coming out of the refineries, but it cannot be safely transported by pipeline, train, or truck. Truck drivers who used to cover hundreds of kilometers overnight now have to search for a station every 2 days. Factories are reducing shifts, and bread lines are mixing with gasoline lines. While people wait in line with jerry cans, Russian tanks on the front lines are also waiting for fuel. Because the same tankers, the same trains, the same lines served both the public and the army. This is no longer just a logistical delay, it is a systemic paralysis. While the Russian army fought on the longest front line in its history, 1,200 plus kilometers, fuel replenishment could no longer be done daily, but only weekly. An army with tanks but no fuel is the most expensive pile of scrap metal. Planes are grounded, tanks are parked, trains are in flames. Even the pipeline around Moscow has exploded, and the Kremlin can no longer supply either the front lines or its cities. This is the turning point of the war. Ukraine first hit production, refineries, then distribution, pipelines and railways. Now it is simultaneously choking consumption, the front lines and cities. This makes it impossible for even the remaining fuel to reach the front lines or city centers. While the people search for gasoline in cans, the army is rationing jet fuel. The fires in Perm, the explosions near Moscow, and the empty pumps all convey the same message. Russia's logistical arteries are being severed one by one. Russia's domestic fuel market was already in critical condition. Since the beginning of the year, gasoline prices have hit record highs, rising 49% for AI-95 and 42% for AI-92. This shows the frightening level of uncontrolled inflation in Russia. Moreover, these price increases are causing some gas stations, unable to raise prices due to government antitrust restrictions, to close down completely. A black market has emerged in occupied Luhansk, where local authorities are selling gasoline at inflated prices. Russia's largest state-controlled oil company, Rosneft, announced that it will impose a 200-liter diesel fuel limit for trucks at all gas stations. This may seem like a meaningless number. However, for a truck driver transporting goods across Russia's vast geography, spanning 11 time zones, this limit was equivalent to a death sentence. While a modern long-haul truck can travel approximately 3,000 kilometers on a full tank, the 200-liter limit meant the truck could only cover 500 to 600 kilometers. This meant that even the 700-kilometer Moscow-St. Petersburg route could not be completed in a single trip. This 200-liter decision immediately created complete chaos. Tens of thousands of truck drivers panicked and flocked to other stations, such as Gazprom, which did not enforce the limit and had larger tanks. However, the infrastructure of these stations was not designed to handle such a large load. The tanks were emptied within hours. The roads leading to the stations were completely blocked by kilometre-long lines of trucks. Trucks stopped, shelves emptied, prices skyrocketed, factories closed, and millions of people fell into poverty. One of the regions hardest hit by the fuel crisis is Crimea. Here, the occupying authorities imposed price caps and limited gasoline sales to 20 litres per customer. This amount is unaffordable for the vast majority of people living on the minimum wage. Kilometre-long queues formed at gas stations. People wait for hours, sometimes even days, under the sun with rusty cans in their hands. However, more often than not, they encounter "fuel out" signs before their turn comes and are forced to return home in anger and despair. People unable to find fuel began stealing it from each other's cars out of desperation. At night, the tanks of parked cars were siphoned. On social media, people warned each other to lock their tanks. Was this the security Putin promised? Or an anarchic environment where people feared their neighbors? Moreover, even those who found fuel complained. The quality of the fuel on the market had deteriorated so much that people complained about paint-smelling fuel and their engines breaking down. While the public listened to state television saying everything was wonderful, they were faced with the reality of not being able to fill their own car tanks. This is no longer a luxury consumption crisis, but a basic living crisis. The Russian people are paying for the cost of the war, not only with losses on the front lines, but also with empty fuel tanks in their own cars. The biggest financial disaster behind this two-pronged blow and rising costs lies in Putin's own economic planning. When Russia prepared its 2025 war budget, it was based entirely on one assumption: that the average price of Urals crude oil would remain around $59 per barrel. However, by mid-November 2025, this price was trading around $36 to $37. This means that approximately 33% to 35% of expected oil revenues vanished in one fell swoop. We are talking about billions of dollars lost in a single stroke. Energy is the only lifeline that the entire country depends on in Russia. Putin's budget, due to his own arrogance, has been shattered, unable to withstand the global oil market. The consequences of this economic embarrassment are even more severe. Despite being one of the world's largest energy exporters, Russia may become dependent on imports to meet 60% of its fuel needs by the end of 2025 due to the attacks on Ukraine and internal sabotage. Having to import its own fuel is a political fiasco and an economic embarrassment. Where will Putin find this fuel? From China? From Kazakhstan? These countries will see Russia's desperation and extract commercial and political concessions. Putin is losing his power at the diplomatic table because of the war he created. Russia's unstable fuel market is now affecting its neighbors as well. Even in Tajikistan, due to its dependence on Russia, there are shortages of gasoline, diesel, and liquefied gas due to supply disruptions and broken logistics chains. So, how did Putin's energy superpower respond to this situation? The crisis grew so severe that Russia, once an energy giant exporting gas and oil to the world, was forced to import 49,000 tons of gasoline per month from its neighbor and ally Belarus to meet its own domestic demand. This was one of the moments when the Russian people saw the reality. While Putin told them they would take Kiev in 3 days, they ended up begging Belarus for gasoline. The most deadly consequence of the crisis is reflected on the front lines. The Moscow Times analysis shows that Russia is facing the risk of a jet fuel shortage. To alleviate the fuel shortage, the government has allowed refineries to produce winter diesel by mixing summer diesel fuel with kerosene. This is not a precaution, but a trick born of desperation. The head of the country's largest private fuel supplier has explicitly warned that this measure could increase jet fuel prices and create new risks for the aviation sector. This means that at the most critical moment of the war, the Russian Air Force, which must maintain air superiority, is at risk due to fuel shortages. If the tanks stop at the front and the planes cannot take off, Putin's entire war plan will collapse due to a jet fuel crisis. However, the reality presented by Kremlin media is quite different. Russian Gazette proudly reported that foreign delegates were stunned by the incredible capabilities of the newest stealth fighter jet, the Su-57E, unveiled at the Dubai Air Show. Komsomolskaya Pravda announced that Russia plans to build an extensive high-speed rail network across the country. It's as if the country is experiencing an economic boom, with no impact from war, sanctions, or stagnation. This is a huge irony. Russia appears in government media as a thriving, ambitious, and victorious country. But when you step away from this government spectacle and look at the reality, the whole picture changes. While the public watches the fantasy of high-speed rail networks on television, they see rail lines paralyzed by burned-out tankers. Even Putin's inner circle is no longer indifferent to what is happening. German Gref. This name does not belong to an opposition figure or an activist. He is the CEO of Russia's largest bank, Sberbank. He was Putin's minister responsible for economic reforms, a technocrat raised by the system, respected even by the West. Gref's words are not a rebellion, but a panic call made by a system administrator out of fear. The current state of the economy is unsustainable. So, what drove Gref to go this far? It was the fear of losing. Putin's elites weathered the initial shockwave of the war. Despite the West seizing a few assets, they initially believed the system would hold. But now, Gref's leaked statements show that belief has been shattered. These leaks, revealed by sources such as The Guardian and Medusa, show that Gref not only said that the current state of the economy is unsustainable, but also clearly stated that the impact of Western sanctions has now reached undeniable proportions. This is a clear vote of no confidence in Putin. Normally, revealing such a truth would end Gref's career or even land him in prison. But Gref is still in office. Why? Because this is proof that Putin's power is no longer absolute. Traditional allies within the Kremlin now fear the collapse of the system more than they fear Putin. These elites see very clearly that their wealth and Russia's future are being consumed by Putin's insatiable appetite for war. GREF'S outburst brought the widening gap between Putin and the people to the very table behind the closed doors of the Kremlin. While the people struggle with empty shelves in the markets, GREF tells Putin, the war economy is killing the civilian economy. This is the biggest indirect proof showing the Russian people the truth. While the Russian media propagates that everything is wonderful and that Western sanctions are ineffective, hearing a figure like GREF oppose Putin is the biggest crack in the wall of propaganda. The Russian people are beginning to think, so the situation is much worse than we've been told. This is a striking picture of how Putin's inaction and oppression reveal the truth to his own people. GREF'S move has put Putin in a difficult position, not only economically, but also politically and morally. For more than 20 years, Putin has presented himself as the sole guarantor of stability and prosperity. Now, however, the biggest financial pillar of this stability, the head of the biggest bank, is coming out and saying, "We are being driven into a catastrophe beyond our control." What does this mean? It shows that Putin's most trusted allies are struggling in the face of the West's moves, and moreover, that these allies are now turning against Putin. They don't want to drown with Putin on a sinking ship. They are the first in line to abandon ship, the smartest elites. The picture we are showing you today is clear. Russia is under a three-pronged attack, both from within and from outside. The sabotage in Perm showed the failure of Putin's internal security system and how helpless it is against the ghost army. The fuel queues proved that Putin has torn up his stability contract with his people. The risk of jet fuel shortages revealed that even the war economy is eating itself. Putin is trying to finance the war by extracting money and resources from his own people, and even his most loyal supporters. But every step he takes only shows that Russia is being dragged into an uncontrolled economic and social crisis. Putin's own actions are showing his people the truth. No matter how much state television lies, the price tags in the market, the empty pumps at gas stations, and the tankers burning on the tracks scream the truth. If the Kremlin cannot find a way out of this economic hell it has created, it will not be military failures, but the anger of its own people and their empty pots that will bring Putin's rule to an end. So, what do you think about this? Please share your thoughts in the comments. To stay updated on new videos, please subscribe to our channel and don't forget to turn on notifications. Thank you for choosing us.